Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Director Stephanie and I, and Director-elect Peter, appreciate you having us with you for this follow-up to the January meeting. The board highlights have been out for some time now, and it actually got published in some other materials, so you may have seen them. But we're going to go ahead and start the meeting. We have several things to talk about, but we shouldn't keep you the entire hour. First of all, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about programs and meetings and awards that in that section of the board meeting that we had in January. We did have a fair amount of discussion from the Elevate Rotaract Task Force who had met to talk about dues for Rotaractors. The RI did a survey of Rotaractors about a year ago, and we did not feel at our last meeting that the survey was statistically valid around the whole world. So we conducted another survey that was conducted in October and November. I was excited that we had over 10,000 respondees to that survey, Rotaract respondees, opining on what their attitude and feeling was about dues. So what the Elevate Rotaract Task Force brought to the board was a fee structure of $5 for university-based clubs per person and $8 for community-based clubs, that is per annum. We also agreed that as of July the 1st of 2022, that we would do away with the one-time chartering fee of $50 per new club. And these fees will also not go into effect until July the 1st of 2022. Just stop for a moment. If you're not talking, if you could mute, there is some background noise there. Maybe I can mute the people that are there. That fixed it. The reason for the waiting until July of 2022 to implement the dues is to give us time to show Rotaractors the value for their dues, the full value for their dues. As you know, we talked about last July that we adopted a program with Toastmasters to bring a Rotary branded program, and it should be in July or August, we're going to be rolling out at least 8 different modules of for Rotaractors on the Toastmasters program. And they will be at rotary.org, my Rotary. And so we'll roll that out. There's several other things that we're planning on for Rotaractors to show them value. Another biggie in there, kind of aside, is that we're going through this computer conversion that we've been talking about for several years now. And the financial management system will be probably completed in March. After that, we'll be rolling out the rest of the back office. And what that does give us is the ability to handle at the RI level Rotaractors in the same way as in terms of a database that we do handle Rotarians currently. We also clarified a position from October of this past year regarding the age limit. And we agreed, just some modification of the language, that a Rotaract club may, but is not required to, establish upper age limits, provided that the club obtain the concurrence of its members and the sponsoring club, if there is one. In October, we completely, as a board, removed any age limits out of a Rotaract club. In other words, they did not age out at 30 anymore. And then there's some pockets of the world that felt like that might not be good for them. So we added just the language may, but is not required to establish upper age limits. We agreed to work on increasing Rotary's engagement in local communities, both at the regional level in the zones and internationally. And we approved a non-Rotarian event concept for launch at the 2023 Melbourne Convention. Some of you are familiar with past Rotary International Conventions where we have a Rotaract pre-convention event. We've had an Interact pre-convention event. And this will be a community-based event in Melbourne where it will be the day before the convention, where we'll have all kinds of stuff showcasing activities and opportunities to get people involved and hopefully entice them into Rotary. Also at the board meeting, we selected the 1920 recipients for the Rotary Global Alumni Service Award and the Rotary Alumni Association of the Year Award, and those will be awarded at the 2020 convention in Honolulu. We also approved 147 recipients of the 2019-2020 Service Above Self Award. And I was fairly pleased and I'm pleased to share with you that Zone 33 had 9 Service Above Self Awards that were awarded at this past meeting, and that exceeds the average of every zone in the world. So you should be very proud of the people who are being recognized in our 2 zones for that honor. Some of them will be awarded at the convention in Honolulu if they're there. Others will be awarded at the local level. And I guess at that point I'll turn it to Stephanie, Director Stephanie, for Administration and Finance. Stephanie, are you there? Okay, Stephanie, are you with us? Technology is grand when it works, isn't it? There was, while we're waiting to see if we get her in, there was a private question about keep questions till the end. Let's go ahead and take questions on that part while we're seeing if Stephanie can get with us. George, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, David. Good afternoon, all. I just wondered with regard to the subscription that Rotaract is going to be having in 2022. It was actually a question brought up by a DGE, and apparently they've had a conversation, or a few of them have, about whether districts will be charging also. And I wondered if the board had considered the fact of whether districts would be adding to this fee, or if there was any guidance as to whether not to do that. Is it something that was discussed?
That was discussed at some length, George, and the Rotary Board decided to stay silent on that point because there are districts around the world that charge Rotaract fees now. From the survey, we did ask specifically, does your districts charge fees? And while most of them are a token fee of $1 or $2, there are a lot of districts around the world that do charge Rotaract, already charge Rotaractors a fee. But Rotary, as an international organization, decided to remain silent on it.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Stephanie says she appears to be unmuted on her phone, but we can't hear her.
Can anybody hear me?
Now we have you, Stephanie. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right.
Stephanie, before you do, there's another question that came up in the thread. Any discussion about Rotaractors being able to access TRF funds without sponsor clubs? That has been discussed, and it has been forwarded over to the Rotary Foundation trustees to consider it. There are legal ramifications and or issues within the United States relative to the 501c3 status and the maintenance of that, where people have benefit to the thing. There's also some discussion and concern around the world about Rotaractors accessing funds when they hadn't contributed funds. And I do believe that the Board of Trustees will probably come forward with some kind of phased in or graded up, graduated up access to funds in the future based on giving or based on a district's allocation, but it has not been settled yet. It's still being talked about at the Board of Trustees level. Did that answer the question? Okay. And next, Stephanie, with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. All right, everybody. It's good to be on the call with you, and I'm so glad you can hear me now. At our board meeting in January, we also took a look at a couple of administration issues and a finance issue. Now, this next decision, some of you are probably going to cheer and a few of you may cry, but the board agreed to stop publishing the official directory. So if you have a copy of the 1920 directory, hold on to it because it's a collector's item. That's the last one that will be officially printed. The other thing that was approved was President-elect Holger's Rotary committee appointment, and also his selection of the Vice President, Jarita Solari, the Treasurer, Bharat Pandya, and the Executive Committee Chair, me. So those people were approved. And finally, we looked at the district governor's funding budget for the next Rotary year, 2021, and it comes in at $9.3 million, and that was approved. So if Peter is on the line, Peter, there were a couple of things that the board looked at for clubs and district. Would you like to share them?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good, Peter.
Yes.
Okay. So there were two matters relating to clubs and districts that the board considered, and I should perhaps just add that I was backbenching for the January and April meetings. The incoming directors sit at the back of the board meeting. It was a novel experience for me to sit in on the board, quite fascinating. After a few more glasses of wine, I'll share some more thoughts, but perhaps not at this time. So one issue that the board discussed was the global membership test project. It is not club-based. I don't know too much about that, and maybe David and Stephanie, you've had more background on this. So that was discussed, and I agreed that we should continue with that membership model. David, can you share any further background thoughts, because this was rather new to me?
Stephanie is going to be talking about shaping Rotary's future because she's a part of that committee, and we'll let her address that in just a few minutes, if that's okay.
All right. So the only other thing that I needed to report on was that the board reviewed 6 resolutions that were adopted by the 2019 Council on Resolutions, and I was just trying to get them for you, and I'm having trouble going to my other laptop to get them. These were resolutions that were passed by the council last year and went to the board for consideration. 6 were passed, and again, I just can't get them quickly enough to share them with you. So perhaps I'll do a note and send them around after this meeting.
So a couple of things that were not part of the meeting per se, the action in the meeting, but that were important, I think, was that we heard a report about in polio now, polio plus, that type of thing, and some announcements that the Pakistan government has made that they say they are finally serious now about the eradication of polio. We'll see, but they are talking very seriously that they're ready. The incoming chair of the Foundation Board of Trustees has also not publicly announced, but is stating that there will be a meeting of the trustees in all probability there next year. As you know, there's a new trustee coming on the Board of Trustees in July that is from that area. It's the gentleman that Barry Rassin talked about, who was picked up in the limo and blindfolded and went to see, I guess, the Taliban. So we'll see, but I'm very excited and optimistic about the words that we heard there about Pakistan and how they're getting on board now toward the eradication of polio. And totally aside from the board, but need to make each one of you aware, because just as a precaution, because you represent over a dozen of our districts, a full third of them, but Zone 34 will have its upcoming Rotary Director nominee selection in September to October timeframe of this year. So if you're in Zone 34, kind of be keeping an eye on that in your zones to make your districts to make sure that that's being handled. And with that, I'll turn it to Stephanie to talk about shaping Rotary's future, and if you'd like to talk about the global membership, and if not, I can follow back with it.
Sure, David. So the Global Membership Test Project is also referred to as a non-club participant model, and it comes directly from one of the 4 priorities in our new strategic plan, and that is expand our reach. So it is tied to the Grow Rotary initiative in a way. What it suggests is that Rotary is testing a way for people to come and experience the magic of Rotary without necessarily belonging to a club. They're going to test market this in 2 places, one in Houston, which is the site of one of our upcoming conventions, and also in Chicago. So the idea behind the test project is to see how would it work, how would people engage in service, how would they handle collection of dues, how would fellowship work. But it's a non-club participant model, and we agreed as a board to support the continuation of trying that and testing it. So the other discussions that we had focused on, you may be aware that there are two committees beyond the Strategic Planning Committee that have been looking at the future of Rotary. One, of course, is the Operations Review Committee, but the second is the Shaping Rotary's Future Committee, which is a fairly newer committee, been in operation now for, I think this is its 2nd year. So that committee was tasked by the board to look at our volunteer structure and what does that look like between what happens at the club level all the way up to Rotary International. So the committee recognized that in our volunteer roles, we need to be more attractive and appealing to a broader demographic, and that the structure that we currently have is fairly inflexible. There was a fellow on the Strategic Planning Committee when I chaired it, and he reminded us that between where he was at the club level and the presidency of RI, there were 19 different levels. And he said, I won't live long enough to ever do that. So we are looking at, our priorities, and one of them is to adapt and make ourselves more nimble and reactive to change. And so that certainly falls into this area of flattening our structure. So the way the committee began to work is by looking at the primary functions of a club. So a club is supposed to include service and fellowship and fundraising, and they're supposed to reach out, and we're supposed to engage our membership, and of course have some sort of administration. So they looked at all of that through the lens of 5 goals. The first one, we need to look at making positions more meaningful and doable. How often do we lose excellent talent because they look at a position and they think, well, I can't do that. I can't hold my job and raise a family and be a district. I can't do that. So we need to make sure our positions are doable for people who have the skill set to do them. The second goal is make sure that we're delivering the right kinds of products to all of our participants. That doesn't just mean club members, it means anybody who engages with Rotary. So it could also mean people who benefit by our service. The third goal, supporting organizational strategy. So again, taking a look at that umbrella of the strategic plan and making sure that the things that are happening at the club level support that strategy. The fourth, becoming more participant focused. And again, participant is a word that encompasses people who engage with Rotary both as members or as people who benefit from Rotary. And then finally, the one I already mentioned, flattening our organization. So the committee came up with, and continues to come up with, models. So it's important to note that right now, any proposed model and concept are just under consideration, and there aren't any decisions in any way, shape, or form. They're just things that the board are considering and looking at. In April, the Shaping Rotary's Future Committee is going to consider all the feedback that we've given them, and they'll come up with revised concepts to bring to our board meeting in April. Then, if we improve whatever they've come up with in principle, they will get a green light to move forward and try to look at how to pilot and test what they've come up with before any final rollout would be considered. So that's just a general overview of what's been happening with Shaping Rotary's Future Committee. You may have heard about some of this. You may have heard people question you about it. So we just wanted to share with you where the board stands on what that activity is to date. So does anybody have any questions about Shaping Rotary's Future or anything that the three of us have shared with you this afternoon? Don't look so happy. I can see all of your faces. Come on. No questions? All right. Well, David and Peter, we must have done an absolutely outstanding job. So if there are no other questions, I'll ask David if he has any final thoughts. And if we want to conclude, David will give us the go-ahead to end the call.
Okay, thank you all for being with us today. I'm going to stop the recording now.